Then my aunt snatched Grandma's $5 million cashier's check off the dining table, tore into tiny pieces, and tossed them into my lap like confetti. The whole room burst into laughter. My uncle leaned over and whispered, "You were always a nobody, and you'll leave here with nothing." They thought ripping up paper meant stripping away my inheritance and erasing 10 years of loyal caregiving. I didn't yell, cry, or beg. I just quietly collected every shredded scrap, slid them into my coat pocket, and smiled. Because what my greedy family didn't know was that paper wasn't where the money lived. Exactly 15 minutes later, the front door opened and the regional bank president walked into the room holding a leather briefcase. Follow my story until the end to see how their arrogance destroyed them, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Clara, and at 27 years old, I learned that greed has a way of making people blind to the truth. For 10 long years, while my peers were building careers and starting families, I stayed by my grandmother Evelyn's side. I was the one who fluffed her pillows, managed her medications, and listened to her stories late into the night when the pain kept her awake. During all those years, my Aunt Victoria and Uncle Richard were nowhere to be found. To them, Grandma was nothing more than an aging inconvenience, waiting to pass away. They'd pop in once a year, drop off a cheap box of chocolates, and leave within 20 minutes, making sure to cast condescending looks at me on their way out. They viewed me as nothing more than an unpaid maid, a broke 20-something with no ambition who was wasting her youth in a creaky old house. What they didn't realize was that my bond with Grandma Evelyn wasn't built on expectations or inheritances. It was built on genuine love and unwavering loyalty. As her health declined, the quiet evenings in her study became less about the past and more about the future. She saw how her own children treated us both, and behind her gentle smile, Grandma was far sharper than anyone gave her credit for. She was quietly preparing a lesson they would never forget, and I had no idea just how explosive that lesson would be. The rain was pouring hard against the window panes the afternoon we gathered in Grandma's grand parlor, just 3 days after her funeral. The room was thick with tension and the suffocating scent of cheap floral perfume. Aunt Victoria sat at the edge of the velvet armchair like a hawk scanning for prey, her designer purse clutched tight in her lap. Next to her, Uncle Richard paced back and forth, impatiently checking his gold watch every few seconds. They hadn't come to mourn. They had come to divide the spoils. "Let's get this over with, Clara," Victoria snapped, her voice cutting through the quiet room like broken glass. "We know there's no formal attorney coming. Dad said Mom had an envelope in her desk with her final wishes. Produce it so we can liquidate the properties and clear out of this place." I didn't argue. I simply walked over to Grandma's mahogany desk, unlocked the center drawer, and pulled out a crisp, sealed envelope. Inside was a single document, an official, certified bank cashier's check made payable directly to me in the staggering amount of $5 million. As I laid it face up on the polished mahogany table, the room went dead silent. Richard stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes bulging as he read the numbers. Victoria gasped, her face flushing a deep, furious crimson. "This is a mistake," she shrieked, snatching the check off the table with trembling hands. She was out of her mind. "You manipulated an old woman into signing over our family fortune." Before I could utter a word, Victoria gripped the heavy paper in both hands. With a sharp, violent tear, she ripped the check straight down the middle, then tore it again and again. The white shreds of paper fluttered down like snow, landing on my lap and spilling across the Persian rug. Aunt Victoria let out a cold, triumphant laugh, dusting her hands off as if she'd just swept away trash. "There," she smirked, leaning over the table until her venomous face was inches from mine. "Your little payday is gone, Clara. No check means no money. You were always a nobody in this family, and you'll leave here with nothing." Uncle Richard chuckled, crossing his arms over his chest with a smug nod. "Consider your little freeloading streak officially over," he added, his tone dripping with disdain. "You have until noon tomorrow to pack your pathetic bags and get out of our mother's house. If you're not gone, we'll have the sheriff throw you into the street." I didn't scream. I didn't cry or beg for mercy. though I could see the cruel satisfaction in their eyes as they waited for me to break down. Instead, I remained completely motionless. I reached down, slowly picking up every torn scrap of the check, smoothing them flat, and sliding them into my coat pocket. They thought they had just destroyed my future with a temper tantrum. What my greedy aunt and uncle didn't realize was that a certified cashier's check isn't an ordinary piece of paper, and Grandma Evelyn wasn't foolish enough to leave my protection to chance. I just smiled, keeping my mouth shut, because I knew the real show hadn't even started yet. The quiet in the room was suffocating as Victoria and Richard stood over me, reveling in what they believed was a total victory. Victoria was already pulling out her phone to call an estate liquidator, while Richard poured himself a glass of Grandma's fine crystal scotch. They were so absorbed in their triumphant celebration that neither of them noticed the quiet hum of an engine pulling up the long, winding driveway outside. Precisely 15 minutes after the check was shredded, heavy footsteps echoed across the front porch. The heavy oak front door opened, and a sharp, cool breeze swept into the entry hall. A tall man in a tailored charcoal suit stepped into the parlor, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. Alongside him was an associate carrying an official legal binder. Victoria frowned, pocketing her phone with an annoyed huff. "Can I help you? This is a private family matter, and the estate isn't open for appraisal yet." The man didn't flinch. He adjusted his silver wire glasses and scanned the room with a calm, commanding authority that instantly cut through the tension. "I am Arthur Vance, Regional President of First National Trust," he announced, his deep voice filling the high-ceilinged room. "And this is Mr. Sterling, Senior Estate Counsel for the firm." Uncle Richard nearly choked on his drink, his smug expression instantly dissolving into sheer confusion. "The bank president? Why on earth is the bank president coming to our mother's private home?" Mr. Vance paid no attention to Richard's sputtering. He walked straight past my aunt and uncle, ignoring their outstretched hands entirely. He stopped directly in front of where I sat, bowed his head slightly in deep professional respect, and said, "Good afternoon, Miss Clara. We are here to finalize your grandmother's instructions." Aunt Victoria rushed forward, her heels clicking angrily on the hardwood floor. "Mr. Vance, there's been a mistake. Whatever document Clara showed you is fraudulent. In fact, the paper check she had was destroyed. It's gone. She has no claim to anything here, and as Evelyn's legal heirs, we demand you speak to us." Mr. Vance slowly turned, looking at Victoria over the rim of his glasses with a mixture of cold amusement and pity. "Mrs. Victoria, the only mistake made here today was yours," Mr. Vance said calmly. "That paper cashier's check you so eagerly tore apart was merely a ceremonial receipt, a physical courtesy copy requested by your mother to test a theory she had about her family." Richard's face drained of all color. A test. "Precisely," Mr. Vance continued, placing his briefcase on the table and snapping the brass locks open. "The actual $5 million was transferred 3 weeks ago into an irrevocable, pre-funded private trust account. It is registered exclusively under Miss Clara's name, protected by biometric encryption and federal banking protocols. Tearing up a piece of paper has as much legal effect on her money as ripping up a receipt has on a house you already bought." Victoria stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Mr. Vance pulled a thick leather-bound dossier from his briefcase and laid it flat. "Furthermore, Mrs. Evelyn knew you would attempt to intimidate or deceive her caregiver upon her passing. So, she included a very specific clause in her trust deed regarding any attempt to destroy estate documentation or harass the primary trustee." He looked directly at Victoria and Richard. "I suggest you pay very close attention to what I am about to read next." Mr. Vance adjusted his glasses and began to read from the official legal document, his voice ringing clearly through the silent parlor. "Item 4, Clause B. Should any blood relative attempt to undermine, destroy, or forcefully seize the assets designated for Clara, all secondary conditional stipends allocated to said relative shall be immediately and permanently revoked." Aunt Victoria gasped, clutching her throat. "Secondary stipends? What stipends?" "Your mother left a separate pool of $200,000 to be divided between the two of you," Mr. Vance explained smoothly, looking up from the paper. "However, That money was contingent on one strict condition, that you treat Clara with respect and allow the settlement process to proceed without hostility. By snatching a financial instrument from her hands and destroying it in an act of malice, you have explicitly violated your mother's final directive. No, Uncle Richard shouted, stepping forward in desperation. That's not fair. We didn't know. You can't enforce a trick like that. It is not a trick, Mr. Richard. Sterling, the legal counsel, interjected quietly. It is a legally binding behavioral clause. And it is completely final. Mr. Vance turned his back on my white-faced relatives and retrieved a slim, high-tech digital tablet from his briefcase. He held it out toward me with a gentle, reassuring smile. Miss Clara, if you would simply provide your digital authorization signature here, the complete transfer of the $5 million trust, as well as the deed to this entire estate, will be finalized under your sole ownership. I looked up at Victoria and Richard. The arrogance and cruelty that had filled their faces just minutes ago had vanished, replaced by sheer panic and ruin. Without saying a word, I took the stylus and signed my name. The silent vibration of the tablet confirmed the transaction was complete. Within seconds, the deed to the estate and full control of the $5 million trust belonged exclusively to me. Mr. Vance carefully packed his briefcase, gave me a polite nod, and informed my aunt and uncle that they had exactly 1 hour to vacate the premises before local security arrived to escort them off the property. The grand celebration they had planned for themselves ended in absolute silence as they slunk out the front door, unable to even look me in the eye. They came expecting to strip me of everything, only to realize that their own greed had completely ruined them. In the months that followed, I chose to honor Grandma Evelyn's memory in the way she truly deserved. I restored her beloved house, keeping it as a peaceful sanctuary, and used a portion of the trust to launch a non-profit foundation dedicated to supporting full-time elder caregivers who sacrifice their own lives to care for their loved ones. Looking back at those torn scraps of paper I still keep tucked inside my desk drawer, I'm reminded of the ultimate lesson Grandma taught me. True wealth isn't just about the numbers in a bank account, but the loyalty and integrity you carry in your heart. Loud arrogance will always stumble over its own ego, while quiet patience wins in the end. I'm curious to know, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have given them a second chance, or let them face the consequences of their own choices? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Thank you for watching until the end.